Heading down the shore. Have a ball once more.
Here, imaginations run wild and time stands still. Because here, you can find the best of the Jersey Shore, all on one 5-mile island. So leave the old you behind and get lost in the woods.
Wild, wild, wildwood days.
Score and save in southeastern PA and Delaware with Colony Pools this football season, and let the experts close your pool with a custom Merlin safety cover in green for the birds. And if you join our Winter Watch team, we'll give you another 20% off, and Colony Pools will handle it all. Keep your tiles on your pool, not in your pool. Fly with Colony right now, birds fans. Visit flywithcolony.com. EAGLES, Eagles.
Well, welcome into the National Football Show, everybody. My name's Marc Farzetta. That's Bill Colarulo, and you may notice neither one of us are Dan Sileo, but I guess they just decided that JAKIB Media Bill, just whoever has a vowel in their last name, if they could just talk football for a couple hours, that would be most appreciated. What's going on, Bill?
Oh, 10 days, Farzy. 10 more days, and we are there, my friend.
I can't wait. I was filling in for our friend John McMullen on Birds 365 earlier in the week, and Jody McDonald asked me the question. He might have asked you a similar question this week as well about the Eagles kind of limping out of the gate, the Eagles being in this position where they're kind of going to be ready for this Super Bowl hangover, and it's going to kind of linger, and they're not going to jump out against the Patriots, and they're honoring Tom Brady up there in opening week, and the Eagles might have their struggles. I just don't see it. I just don't see it. I know we're going to get into plenty of Eagles storylines as the show goes on today. We're doing 2 hours with you today, folks. We got plenty of national stories. We got our AFC predictions throughout all the divisions. We got also the MVP prediction, Offensive Player of the Year, Defensive Player of the Year. We're going to cover the whole gambit when it comes to the NFL, as this is, of course, the National Football Show. But, Bill, just right out of the gate, are you anticipating any sort of Super Bowl hangover when it comes to the Philadelphia Eagles, sir?
I'm not. I mean, the problem is if you look at the history of the NFL, they would tell us, yeah, you should be worried about a Super Bowl hangover. But I'm not looking at the numbers. I'm just looking at this team. And with the veteran leadership that this team has with Brandon Graham and Jason Kelsey and Lane Johnson, Fletcher Cox, and then Jalen Hurts. I know he's not a veteran, but the guy carries himself like he is. It's hard to believe that this team is going to come out with any sort of Super Bowl hangover. I mean, the schedule is set up the right way for this team. I know it's a tough schedule, but the first 8 games of the year are all winnable football games. So they need to take advantage of it. They can't afford to have a Super Bowl hangover. This isn't a team that can come out to a slow start and hope to win a ton of games late with the way the schedule lines up. But I'm confident. I think this team, veteran leadership, good coaching, is going to come out and not have the Super Bowl hangover.
Yeah, and the other thing that's going against them is the idea that no team has won back-to-back NFC East titles, let alone the Super Bowl. They haven't even won NFC East titles back-to-back, since 2003, 2004, I believe it is, with the Eagles doing that 20-some years ago. So you look at this squad as it stands right now, and I think you hit the nail right on the head there, and it's the number one reason why I believe in this team this year. I mean, other than the fact that they're talented, and other than the fact that I believe they also have depth, especially on the offensive side of the football. But bottom line is the veteran leadership of this team. Like last year, there was just so much talk surrounding this team. And they were referring to it, whether it was Jalen Hurts, it was Jason Kelce, talking about rat poison. You can't read and believe the stuff that's in the media right now. You can't listen to the experts and say how great that team is. They also can't do the other thing, which is buy into the idea that they are that good, and they can't get comfortable. And Jason Kelce last year around this time did this beautiful soliloquy about how this team just can't get comfortable. If you start listening to that, that is when you start to fall apart. But I believe that core four of the veterans that have been around here forever, and Jalen Hurts, who, as you said, carries himself as if he's already a 10-year veteran in the NFL, I think that is going to be almost their protective shield when protecting against the rat poison or being comforted or other people hyping them up too much. And one more thing on that. The thing that I find so interesting is that these veterans, these guys that have been on the team for 10 plus years, these guys like Fletcher Cox and Jason Kelce and Lane Johnson, these guys, they all listen to Jalen Hurts, and they've been doing it really ever since his first year as a starter in the NFL. So that to me shows you that he is without question wise beyond his years. It's not just that he's got Anita Baker, on his playlist. It's the fact that these veterans listen to him and take their cues from him. First man in, last man out. And that to me shows a lot more than just a 25-year-old leader of this football team.
Definitely. And, one of the question marks on this team is there are some new position players, but in some respects, that could actually help this team when you're talking about the Super Bowl hangover, because you're going to have guys who they weren't part of that Super Bowl team last year. You have Jalen Carter, you have Nolan Smith, and you got a couple of new guys that you brought in. Zach Cunningham's going to be your starting linebacker. So this should help that team because these guys weren't a part of that team last year. And you talk about coming from Georgia. These guys are proven winners. So I don't think they're going to come in here with any sort of expectation that this is going to be easy. They know how to work coming from that Georgia football program. But, Mark, it is crazy, though, when you look at these numbers. Now, everything I said about how I'm not worried about the Super Bowl hangover, you look at these numbers, and it is just wild when it comes to the history in the NFL. Like you mentioned earlier, there hasn't been a repeat winner in 20 years in the NFC East. No NFC team has gone back to the Super Bowl after losing in 50 years since the 1974 Minnesota Vikings. And then you throw on top of it, the Eagles have the hardest strength of schedule. They have 10 games against 2022 playoff teams. And only 2 teams since 1994 have lost both coordinators after appearing in a Super Bowl, the 2004 Patriots and the 1994 San Francisco 49ers. So you throw all that in, and we're crazy to say there's not going to be a Super Bowl hangover, but I'm still saying there's not going to be a Super Bowl hangover with this team.
Look, in the last 50 years, I know other teams have had great leadership, and I know in the last 20 years, there's been great leadership in the NFC East, and there's been other teams that are supposed to do more than what the Eagles could possibly do. But I just find this to be such a different case when you talk about all the leaders, you talk about all the talent, you talk about the depth, and you talk about that kind of next man up mentality that this team has really embraced over the last 6 years. And no better example than when they had the most men step up next than that 2017 Super Bowl season. And what I always say about that season in particular, from that season on, I look at this team, and if I am digging to the depth chart of like third stringers, and I'm worried about, let's say, a long snapper, or I'm worried about a punter, like in this case, I would say that your team is pretty set and your team is going to be pretty good. And that's what this Eagles team has. The other part of it is that a guy like Jalen Hurts is just getting started. And how many teams in the NFL can say, not many, I mean, the Bengals, obviously, but not many teams can say that they have the weapons for their quarterback the way the Eagles have weapons for Jalen Hurts. So you're talking about A.J. Brown. You're talking about both, swole and skinny Batman and Devontae Smith. You're talking about a complete stable of running backs. Like, look, Rashad Penny, the biggest thing on him is just stay healthy. We got to keep saying stay healthy about Rashad Penny. But if he does stay healthy, if the Eagles with this deep running back room can keep him healthy, and you have DeAndre Swift catching passes, you have Kenny Gainwell running the ball, and you have Rashad Penny as the in case of emergency break glass type of running back, this offense is complete. And now defense, I do have my concerns. You have the numbers right there, just overall history, but let's talk about the personnel of this Eagles team, because we're not looking at this with, rose-colored glasses. We're not looking at this like it's some kind of Disney script. There are some blemishes on this defense. And when I talk about the linebacker position, as much as I might be confident in Nakobe Dean, we haven't seen it yet. Zach Cunningham was available for a reason, and now all of a sudden he's your starter. You blink and he's your starter. The guy you brought in, Nicholas Morrow, isn't even on your squad anymore, and he was thought going to training camp to be the number one guy next to Nakobe Dean, if not taking the middle linebacker job from Nakobe Dean. Safety position is still a question. You got a defensive coordinator that is just going about this for the second time in his career, although he's got the stamp of approval from Vic Fangio and also Pete Carroll. But what is he going to be like as a defensive coordinator and play caller for this team? The MO on him is Jonathan Gannon 2.0, except he's actually shaking hands with Vic Fangio, you know? So for me, it's not just about the veteran leadership. It's not just about the talent on this team. When you start to really delve into it, you start to think more about some of the blemishes that are with this team. And I don't know about you, but my concerns with this team exist far more on the defense than they do the offense.
Absolutely. You just look at the offense. They're returning everybody with the exception of Isaac Sayamala. So you know that they're going to be okay on that side of the ball. The one question mark is, how is Brian Johnson going to be as a play caller? But he was here last year. This is really a Nick Sirianni, Jalen Hurts offense. But you're exactly right. There are a lot of question marks on that defense. I was not happy when they let TJ Edwards walk. I've been saying it all summer. I did not like that they let him walk. I was okay with Kazir White. He had an up and down year, but TJ Edwards was not only your leader on that defense, he played over 94% of the snaps. He was the leader in tackles, top 7 in the NFL in tackles, and he just played a very solid brand of football on that side of the ball. And they're putting everything on the shoulders of a guy who's played 34 career snaps in the NFL. We're all hopeful Nakobe Dean's going to be the guy he was at Georgia. So am I. But no one knows how he's going to hold up for a 17-game NFL season. We've never seen it done before. And the guy that they did sign almost immediately in free agency, Nick Morrow, isn't even here anymore. So that's a big, big concern is you let TJ Edwards walk, you sign Nick Morrow, and now that guy's not even here. And the starter on this team, they signed, 3 weeks ago in Zach Cunningham? So a lot of times you got to look at their actions, not what they say. And their actions were they weren't confident with the linebacker crew either. They signed both Zach Cunningham and Myles Jack at the same time. And now Myles Jack's retired. Nick Morrow, the free agent you signed, he's not on the team. Big question mark. But there's a big but here. That defensive line is going to be so damn good, Mark, that it may not matter who's back there at that linebacker position. When you have defensive tackles like Fletcher Cox, Milton Williams, Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, a healthy year from Jordan Davis. I don't think he was fully healthy last year. You have a lower leg injury and you're that big, it's going to affect you all season long. But you look at those 4 D tackles that they have there and some under-the-radar guys that made this roster. Kentavious Street, not a bad defensive tackle. Played last year with the New Orleans Saints, played with the 49ers before that, has the ability to stop the run, can generate interior pressure. And you still have Marlon Tuipulotu as your backup nose tackle. Just a very deep position group. And we didn't even talk about the edge rushers. I mean, you throw the edge rushers on top, those linebackers should be able to have a lot of success with the amount of talent the Eagles have with those front 4.
Certainly, and I'm glad you touched on the defensive line because as we continue to unpack storylines surrounding the Eagles going into this season, I think one of the best storylines out there is how good is Jalen Carter really going to be? I mean, last year in the preseason against the Jets, you saw a guy like Jordan Davis blow up the line of scrimmage and blow up the offensive line, and it was like, all right, got what I needed out of that preseason game. Now we can move on to the next one. Jalen Carter did not disappoint in his first preseason game. His first professional snap against the Baltimore Ravens, busting through the offensive line to get into the backfield for at least a quarterback hit there. But when you really do think about it with Jalen Carter and you listen to what Fletcher Cox has said about him, you listen to what Baby Rhino is the new nickname for Jalen Carter. Brandon Graham championing that nickname as well. I mean, you talk about being overly optimistic about anybody. I mean, again, I'll say it, I am optimistic about Nakobe Dean. I am optimistic about Nolan Smith. But the amount of optimism I have for a guy like Jalen Carter is miles above anyone else, to the point where I got to almost slow myself down a little bit here. And we were talking to our friend who hosts this very show, the National Football Show, Dan Sileo, about Jalen Carter, and he uttered the name Jerome Brown. and talked about his footwork. He talked about his speed. He talked about his strength. And those two know each other. Those two knew each other rather well there with the Miami ties there, Sileo and Jerome Brown. So if that's the way you're going to set the bar, if that's how high you're going to set it, then I guess I am a little subdued in my take of Jalen Carter, thinking that there's no way it could possibly be that good. But, man, if you combine the speed that Lane Johnson has talked about, you talk about the strength that Dallas Goedert has talked about from Jalen Carter, then this defensive line isn't just, trying to fill the void of Javon Hargrave, especially with his sack count from last year, but they have surpassed it as far as a guy that could have talent level much higher than what Javon Hargrave was able to provide, even as a veteran. This rookie, is it really that reasonable? Is it that plausible to think that the Eagles have surpassed that level of talent with Jalen Carter already?
Look, as fans, as analysts, we always get ahead of ourselves. We always get carried away, right? But you look at the veterans on this Philadelphia Eagles team and how much they are throwing praise upon Jalen Carter. They usually like to keep these rookies humble. They're not trying to keep this guy humble because they're also in awe of what they are seeing. So that's why I think we are being a little bit subdued, only because you look at what veteran guys on this team are saying about him. And if you're not excited, you're under a rock, because every single person who has seen this kid play in the preseason, in training camp, is saying, watch out. So I think there's some people in the comments saying Defensive Rookie of the Year. We're going to get to that in a second, but a little teaser here. That may be my pick for Defensive Rookie of the Year.
Could very well be. Now, of course, when you talk about Defensive Player of the Year, people like the sexy numbers, right? People like the sack totals, people like tackles for loss and all that stuff. And hey, don't get me wrong, I think a guy like Jalen Carter can certainly do it, but there's going to be another first-round defensive pick playing right behind him, or really to the right or left of him, in of course, Jordan Davis. So I'm looking at what a guy like Jordan Davis could possibly, Nolan Smith, Nolan Smith, what he could bring to the
Jordan
table
Davis
here.
Also a number one pick, just not this year.
Yeah, just not this year. A year ago. But so many guys from Georgia, they're all jumbled in my head. But looking at a guy like that and what Nolan Smith could bring to the table here, you talk about the big splash numbers, you talk about the big splash plays, you talk about his mentality of you have to be hungry enough to eat off the floor. Have you ever been hungry to eat off the floor, hungry enough to eat off the floor? Like, that tells you a lot. And sometimes people say, and I know, Bill, you and I have had this conversation, like, who really cares what they have to say? It's about how they play. And absolutely. But if you could get a little hint to their mindset and their approach to the game, that's all I want to hear from a young player, is that they haven't done anything. They had success in college. Now all that means nothing. Good for them being a first-round pick. It means nothing. When they step on the field, they have to prove their worth. And a guy like Tom Brady talks about it all the time. If you get an opportunity to be on the field, you prove that you're worthy of being on the field, and you can be the best player on the field. Nolan Smith's going to get that opportunity. Obviously, Jalen Carter is going to get it. But the Eagles, I would not be surprised if they have both these guys' names, Defensive Rookie of the Year, being uttered in the same sentence as Defensive Rookie of the Year when they're talking about candidates at the end of the season. Because I think you have a guy like Nolan Smith that's going to have the splash plays, he's going to have the sexy plays and the sacks and all that stuff. But a guy like Jalen Carter overall could be holding down the fort on the interior of that defensive line, making things a lot easier for Nolan Smith to get off the edge, and Hassan Reddick and Brandon Graham and Josh Sweat at the same time.
Yeah, I don't know what you do as a opposing offensive coordinator. How do you stop this defensive line? Where do you put your resources? Do you try to stop Hassan Reddick coming off the edge? Do you try to stop that interior pressure? And there's another guy on that defensive line that I think may have a huge year, and that's Josh Sweat. We've seen Josh Sweat get better every single season in the NFL. He's increased his sack total, and you just see it. His athleticism, how low he gets to the ground when he comes around the edge. I'm expecting a big season from him as well. So you just look at that defensive line. The only thing that may hurt these players from being in the Defensive Player of the Year conversation or Defensive Rookie of the Year is they're going to be so damn good that the stats are hopefully going to just be split amongst all of them, because I think they're all going to put pressure on the quarterback like they did last season.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And the other thing is, who knows? Maybe they'll have another 70 sack season. Maybe they'll go for 75 this year. Maybe they'll really spread the love when it comes to the sacks this upcoming season. That's what I'll cross my fingers for, at least. But you mentioned Josh Sweat, and one of the things that I always think about is when Chris Long was here in the Super Bowl year and the year following and all that, the number one guy, when I had an opportunity to talk to Chris Long, that he was most excited about to really have a breakout season in 2 seasons here, it was Josh Sweat. He said, you just got to watch what this guy can do. He's still coming back from the injury. It's going to take time for him to come back from the injury. Now being 3-4 years removed from it, now being in a defensive line that, of course, has that push up the middle as they had last year with Javon Hargrave, with a splash of Milton Williams, with a little of Ndamukong Suh, as well as Linval Joseph and Fletcher Cox. Now you're going to have that interior as well, maybe even better than what you had last year. Now you can have two guys coming off the edge that can get into that backfield and really make some big plays for this football team. So when people say, 70 sacks, it's not going to happen again, I'm like, yeah, conventional wisdom says it wouldn't happen again, but this defense might be more talented than what they were last year. And the other part of it is, if you get off the defensive line for a second and you go to the linebackers, I know it's a big question mark, but if you were going to be just a little bit more aggressive as a defensive play caller, if you're Sean Desai and you were going to be a little bit more aggressive, wouldn't you be a little bit more aggressive at the linebacker position? Because as much as I think TJ Edwards was a very good linebacker for this team, and if I was you, or Bill, I'm with you. You're talking about him possibly staying around another year and not signing elsewhere for, 3 years, $18 million to sign with the Bears. That's a good contract for him. The Eagles weren't going to pay that. But if he did stay here, I'd be fine with it. But with Nakobe Dean being here, you weren't going to send TJ Edwards to the backfield to blitz. You could send Nakobe Dean in the backfield to blitz. He's got the instincts. He's got the speed. He's got the quickness. He's got the agility. If you're Sean Desai and you're looking at one position you might be able to be a little bit more aggressive with, more so than Jonathan Gannon, it's the middle linebacker position, because that's exactly what it got a guy like Nakobe Dean even mentioned as possibly being a late first round or even a second round pick going into his draft. So you have a guy that can make those big plays for you defensively, and you didn't necessarily have that last year with TJ Edwards, especially when it came to getting into the backfield.
Yeah, TJ Edwards was a solid player, very solid player, but I don't think the upside was there that you have potentially with Nakobe Dean. If Nakobe Dean is the guy we saw at Georgia who was just dominating the SEC, then yeah, this defense has the potential to be really, really scary. Mm-hmm. I don't want to say he's going to be dominating. We haven't seen it yet, but there's that potential there, and the ceiling is very, very high for him. So you are right. Sean Desai can have some fun, hopefully, with this defense. And another guy, not to get you too excited, Farzy, I know how much you love Sidney Brown, but if Sidney Brown starts working his way into this defense and they start running some safety blitz with that guy, man, that could be a lot of fun to watch.
I know we got a minute here, but we'll get into the safety position here, because it's Terrell Edmonds, it's Justin Evans, it's Sidney Brown, obviously Reed Blankenship, Kayvon Wallace is out. He's linked back up with Jonathan Gannon. So we'll get to the conversation. We've talked linebackers, we talked defensive line, we talked a little of the offense there, but we haven't talked about the safety position yet coming up on the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, what we will get into in a little bit here is our defensive player of the year, defensive rookie of the year, offensive player of the year, offensive rookie of the year, overall MVP, comeback player of the year, and potentially even coach of the year. We could get into all that. Now, the NFL, I don't know if you saw this, but NFL.com, Bill, put out their stories when it came, and their predictions when it came to across the league who's going to come away with the hardware this season. Not just the Lombardi Trophy, but the individual awards as well. We'll be getting to that on the show today. We'll also be getting into some of the biggest concerns surrounding the Philadelphia Eagles, who's the biggest threat to the Philadelphia Eagles, not just in the NFC East, but in the entire NFC, and what it does mean for this football team to even have a shot to get back to a Super Bowl. We'll talk about all that and more as Bill Colarulo and myself, Marc Farzetta, are filling in for Dan Sileo here on the National Football Show. Sills has the day off. We'll be back with you in a few. I think. I promise you. Other than that, we'll be back. Tone.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years, and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction, go with trust,
Go Birds!
and go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia dreams. Oh, and go Birds.
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
All right, did you know I was the mommy slam dunk champion?
Really?
Yes, really, don't sound so surprised.
Let's see it.
Oh, you're ready. All right, here we go. Let's hear the crowd. So go to right, go to left, fake them out. Mama, go up, mama!
She did it.
Again?
You can't avoid gravity, but United Healthcare can help you avoid financial surprises by helping you compare costs and doctor quality ratings. United Healthcare.
Uh-huh.
EAGLES, Eagles.
Welcome back, National Football Show. Marc, Farzetta, Bill Colarulo joining you in for Dan Sileo as the day off, getting the weekend started early. You got anything coming up, Bill, for the holiday weekend? You doing anything special? Anything fun? Anything good?
Just hanging at the club. I got probably going to get a little golf in. Take the kids to the pool. Nothing too big. I think you got a big plans this weekend, don't you?
that club. When you said the club, I'm like, damn, man. How I know you got young ones, but how long? Okay, all right. Yeah, just a little, discotheque. I got big
more.
I got going away, hitting up Virginia, going on a little fishing trip, but mostly my wife's family all getting together. I am making brajol. I'm making a lot of brajol in the gravy, in the sauce, right? All that stuff. My mother-in-law is doing some kind of vegetarian lasagna. So I was like, oh, vegetarian. Let me ruin that idea. So I got the brajol. I made the mix and everything for the meatballs. I boiled my eggs already. I got the gravy on the pot right now on the stove as we speak. Smell it in the house. Nothing like it, man. Nothing like it. But I'm making about 30 brajol. We do the small brajol in the family. We do the individual portion brajol. We don't do the big flank steak wrapped and then sliced. You know what I mean?
That's how my grandmom does it. Real big.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. You gotta let that soak in the gravy for hours and hours on end, man, all day. Yeah. But it's a full day, as you know. It's a full day. Can I need to confess something to you, Bill. I need to confess something to you. I might be president of the Justin Herbert hate club. And I know we're going to get into our predictions. And I don't know if you saw these predictions on NFL.com, but they asked their experts MVP honors throughout the league, okay? As you would assume, who do you think is the number one guy?
Would it be Patrick Mahomes?
That would be the one, Patrick Mahomes, okay? Number two on this list would be Mr. Joe Burrow.
If he's healthy. He may not even play in week one.
But here's what I want to know. Does it help you to, not that you can ever plan this, but does it help you to get injured early? Because for your case, if you come back from your injury and say week 2, okay, or week 3, and then you roll through the rest of the season, you can rack up the MVP votes, right? But if you're Jalen Hurts or you're Carson Wentz, i.e. 2017, you get hurt late in the season, you miss time, then I guess you don't get as many votes. I guess it's the recency bias of the MVP voting, I guess.
Yeah, it's just like the NCAA football, right? You could lose a game early. You can't lose a game late and still make it to the top 4. But
perfect analogy.
Yeah. But yeah, I agree with you. But Justin Herbert, I don't share the same hate that you do. I think he's a very good quarterback, and I think he wins in spite of his head coach. I am not a fan of Staley as a head coach. I've seen him make some really bad decisions on both clock management, offensive play calling, and I think Herbert is winning in spite of him. But I think I know where you're going with this, that they have him ranked higher than Jalen Hurts to be able to win the MVP, and that I would disagree with.
Okay. I don't think that Justin Herbert is terrible. All right, let me just make this clear. I don't think that he's terrible, but it's like people talk about the MVP and they got him above Jalen Hurts in this instance. They have him right behind Joe Burrow. Like, I understand it's not the best possible scenario for any young quarterback being out there in Los Angeles with the Chargers, but I just don't get what people love about Justin Herbert, and I don't get why people love talking about him like a top 5 quarterback, top 3 in potential MVP voting. Now, for the record, they have Justin Herbert just ahead of Jalen Hurts. They're both tied for 3 when it came to their votes from their NFL experts. 14 votes in total went to Patrick Mahomes. 6 went to Joe Burrow. 4 votes went to Justin Herbert and Jalen Hurts. But Justin Herbert got the tip of the cap with a plus 50 over under there. And then Jalen Hurts got plus 900. Odds plus 900. I just don't get how Jalen Hurts even compares in anyone's mind or anyone's voting when it comes to the potential of being the NFL MVP. Being on the same level of Justin Herbert doesn't make any damn sense to me whatsoever.
You're preaching to the choir here, Farzy. I mean, I think that Jalen Hurts should be number 2 behind Mahomes. I'm not saying he should be number 1 in light of the season that Mahomes did have last year, but
Sure.
You look at that performance in the Super Bowl, what Jalen Hurts did in the biggest game of the year was historic. The stat line that he put up has never been done in NFL history when you look at his passing yards, his rushing touchdowns, no interceptions. I know the haters want to say that big fumble. I would have felt that fumble was more his fault if he had gotten hit and fumbled the ball. The fact that it kind of just slips out of his hand was just so fluky. But you look at it, and this is why I think the Eagles won't have a Super Bowl hangover when we talk about Jalen Hurts. What did Jalen Hurts do after that horrible fumble in the Super Bowl that led to 6 points the other way? He takes the team right down the field on a long drive and scores a touchdown. This guy has the ability to overcome adversity. And yeah, Jalen Hurts has to be the number 2 going into the season in the MVP odds, in my opinion.
Now, here's what's interesting. Josh Allen and Aaron Rodgers tied for the 5th most votes in the from the NFL.com when voting on the MVP award here. So Josh Allen's been knocked down a couple of pegs, but somehow Justin Herbert has taken over that spot of being the controversial number 2 or number 3 guy on this list. So that's just odd to me. So I don't understand why he gets so much love and respect nationally. I just don't see. And this is coming from a place of like, I say I hate the guy, but like I don't hate the guy, okay? But I don't get the love and admiration that, like, what has he done in the league to warrant so much admiration from around the NFL when it comes to the quote-unquote experts, the national experts voting on something like this, and especially taking over a spot from a guy like Jalen Hurts, who should be 1, Patrick Mahomes, should be 2, Jalen Hurts, and then even after that, if you want to go with Josh Allen still, and you want to go with Aaron Rodgers possibly being in New York now, change of scenery for Aaron Rodgers, and then Justin Herbert cracks into the top 3 conversation just doesn't make any damn sense to me whatsoever.
Yeah, and the biggest stat that people should look at when you're looking at a quarterback is they want to look at passing yards and interceptions and touchdowns, but the biggest stat should be wins and losses. And you look at Jalen Hurts' wins and losses, he's 23-11 in his career, and 7 of those losses came in 21. But you look at Justin Herbert, the guy's only 25-24 in the NFL. So I see what you're saying. You look at wins, but what I said earlier is I do think that it's very tough with a head coach like Staley, and I think he's lost him some games. But I think that the people that love Justin Herbert, because they're looking at the passing yards, there's no doubt. The guy threw for 5,000 passing yards in 2021, he threw for another 4,700 passing yards in 2022, and he has a pretty good touchdown to interception ratio as well. So I think that's what they are looking at. But when you look at Jalen Hurts, you really have to factor it all in. The rushing yards, the wins, the losses, the leadership. And that's what I think when you talk about most valuable player, we're not talking about best throwing quarterback in the NFL. You're talking about the most valuable player to their team. And you can't put Justin Herbert above Hurts.
Okay,
all right. But look at one of the guys, Farzy. You got to look at one of the guys that voted for Herbert. It's Mike Florio. He can't go against his boy Chris Sims.
Right, he's got to make him look good. Absolutely, you got to make him look good. But to stay on this topic, when it comes to the MVP and it comes to Jalen Hurts, what do you really need to see? The question I've enjoyed this offseason, like last year, it was the very generic, probably every sports talker's favorite conversation, asking a question about whether or not a young quarterback in your city is the quote unquote guy. Is he the guy, right? Well, Jalen Hurts answered that question with a exclamation point, okay? But when we talk about MVP and we talk about being the best quarterback in the league and not being the runner-up or even winning a Super Bowl, whatever it might be, what is it that Jalen Hurts needs to do to get it? And that's the question I have kicked around for the last 6 months. What does he have to do to get more respect, whether it's on a Chris Sims list, whether it's on an NFL.com MVP voting list or whatever it might be? What does he really need to do? Like specifically, what does he need to do? And there's two things that really jumped out to me about what he needs to do. And you tell me if you're on the same wavelength as I am. Number one, he's got to do it again. He can't just 1 year. Okay, Carson Wentz is the perfect example of this. Now, I do not believe that Jalen Hurts is Carson Wentz. I believe Jalen Hurts will have a much better career than Carson Wentz. And as its time has gone on, it looks like that's not going to be nearly as high as a bar to get to anyway. He already has it, in my opinion, in the rearview mirror. But as far as one great year as a starting quarterback in the NFL, he's got one great year. He's an MVP candidate, blah, blah, blah. So do it again and keep on doing it. Prove to everyone that wasn't some flash in the pan. After that, even more specifically, and I hate that this is what it's got to be because I think it takes away from his the uniqueness of his game. And he, of course, even said throughout training camp, I want to embrace the uniqueness of my game. But those passing yards got to go up. It's looked down upon, unless you're Lamar Jackson. It's looked down upon for the most part if you're running the football as much as he is. If you're not throwing for touchdowns, if you're not throwing for yards, it's like the national pundits look at it and go, oh, well, he's supposed to throw the ball. He's not supposed to run the ball. And I think even a little bit of throwing to the running backs, not even necessarily downfield as much, but dump offs, check downs, whatever it might be. If he does that, maybe even a quarter more than he did last year, then you're going to see those numbers skyrocket, and you're going to see the national people looking, go, oh, look who's throwing the football now. And I hate to say it, but I think that's what they're looking at. So it comes to being as good as he was last year and then upping those passing numbers. And I think that's what will catch the national media's attention to really put this guy as the MVP of the league.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I think another important factor, and we touched on it a little earlier, is he's got to play a 17-game season.
Sure.
You can't afford to get hurt at the end of the year again. That's always going to kill you in the MVP race. But, one of the things that a lot of these national experts, quote unquote, they obviously did not watch a lot of the Philadelphia Eagles games. And I don't want people to think that I'm just a Jalen Hurts defender. I am a big fan of his. I think he's a very good quarterback. But I think if you look at the way the Philadelphia Eagles games went last season, there's a reason why Jalen Hurts didn't throw for more yardage. They didn't have to throw for more yardage. There were so many games in that regular season where it was over by midway through the third quarter. And when you have a dominant run game like the Eagles did, they would have been crazy to keep throwing the football. So there were a lot of games where third, fourth quarter, we were leaning on the run to just keep dominating the line of scrimmage, run the clock, and that does hurt him. You're right. The fact that he doesn't have those big passing yardage, but we saw it in the Super Bowl. The guy's capable of doing it. He threw for over 300 yards in the Super Bowl.
Mm-hmm. Certainly. And by the way, I know there's some people that look at Patrick Mahomes and they say, oh, if Jalen Hurts would have stayed healthy, he would have been the MVP. I think what it would have come down to is that the Eagles got Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown in the offseason, and they added him with Devontae Smith, excuse me. And they obviously had a great 1,000-yard rusher in Miles Sanders. He had a great year behind a great offensive line. The overall selling point to make Patrick Mahomes the MVP last year, not just talking about games missed by Jalen Hurts, but Patrick Mahomes, is the fact that he lost his best wide receiver in the offseason, and he still put forth an MVP season. And still had an incredible year with the Kansas City Chiefs. So I think that's why, if it came down to it, Jalen Hurts stays healthy last year, Patrick Mahomes plays the way he did last year, I still think that Patrick Mahomes would end up getting the MVP based on losing Tyreek Evans in the offseason.
Tyreek Hill.
Jeez, excuse me. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, not taking anything away from Patrick Mahomes, he does have the best tight end maybe in NFL history on his team. But what he was able to do with that receiving core was really remarkable. And that's sometimes the shot that people do take at Jalen Hurts is, well, look at all the talent around them. But outside of Patrick Mahomes, who really is on another level, you look at the other quarterbacks, they all have weapons. You look at Joe Burrow. He arguably has a better wide receiving core than the Eagles do. Arguably, it's close. But you look at Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, that receiving core is unbelievable. So I don't like when Jalen Hurts is talked about negatively because he has weapons. All of these guys have weapons. Don't talk to me about Patrick Mahomes. He's maybe the greatest quarterback we've ever seen. So you can't compare these guys to Mahomes, but all these other quarterbacks have weapons. I mean, you look at Tua in Miami. Look at the wide receiving core he has. We were talking about Tyreek Hill, Jalen Waddle. So a lot of these guys have weapons, and that's sometimes the Hurts haters love to talk about. And I thought all that would have been put to rest when you saw Gardner Minshew come in, and he couldn't reach the same level of success that Jalen Hurts did with that same offense. But
no, now I'm starting to think about the Eagles' backup quarterback role, and I'm starting to be concerned again about Marcus Mariota. I know we'll get into it again when we talk about it again at the top of the hour about some concerns we have regarding the Philadelphia Eagles and that offense. And I did mention earlier that if you're digging to talk about the quarterback, the backup quarterback or backup roles or third string roles, then odds are you got a pretty damn good football team. So we'll get to that. But I want to move on to the next possible award here. Offensive Player of the Year. According to NFL.com, it's going to go to a rival in the NFC. It's a team, Bill, that a lot of people are looking at, especially the national pundits, will be the Eagles' greatest threat to getting back to the Super Bowl in the upcoming season. Can you take a wild guess as to who the Offensive Player of the Year would be, according to NFL.com?
Well, I'd kind of be cheating because I have it up in front of
me. You're a bastion of honesty. Thank you.
Christian McCaffrey from the San Francisco 49ers is the number one vote getter for the NFL.com's Offensive Player of the Year going into the season. It's hard to disagree. I mean, look, Offensive Player of the Year, there's a lot of candidates that could become Offensive Player of the Year. But when you look at what Christian McCaffrey's able to do in multiple aspects of the offense, not only can he run the ball, but the guy catches just as many balls, if not more, than most wide receivers. I mean, I think the guy had 100 catches one year. So you factor all that in with his rushing yards and his receiving yards, you could see why a lot of people are pointing to him as maybe being the Offensive Player of the Year.
So here's the thing. All running backs, like I think this is like he's been at this level for a long time. But I think all running backs kind of need to go this route. And Darren Sproles did it for a long time, not at the level that Christian McCaffrey has done it, but Darren Sproles in terms of versatility. I mean, I think this is just the way the league is going. I mean, with the kind of, it's not even a revolt. If a guy like Saquon Barkley is saying, hold out, and then like, okay, I'm here, like with no holdout really, then you've kind of lost a lot of your competitive advantage. You lost a lot of your leverage. I mean, you know about leverage, and you have situations now with Jonathan Taylor where it's like, oh yeah, go ahead. Yeah. Seek yourself a trade, see who's going to pay you. And it's nobody. I think if you're a young running back, you need to learn how to catch footballs, man. It's not just about running between the tackles anymore. It's not even about speed, bouncing out to the outside. It's about playing. I think Deebo Samuel called his position the wide back. Okay. I don't know if this is going to be a back wide situation with Christian McCaffrey and other running backs coming up through the ranks now, but you have to be able to be a pass catcher. And we even talk about it now with the Eagles and DeAndre Swift and Kenny Gainwell and having two guys that can catch passes. You're going to have that. It's not just the wear and tear on the body anymore of a running back, running the football through the offensive line and into the defensive line and then being met by a linebacker or a safety coming up with a full head of steam. It's about lining up a guy like he used to have in Darren Sproles and putting him in the slot. It's about a guy like DeAndre Swift, who Nick Sirianni has talked about, who has wide receiver. He doesn't have running back hands. He's got wide receiver hands. Every running back that's coming up through the ranks has to be more like Christian McCaffrey. And I know that that's a tall order. I'm not saying they have to be Christian McCaffrey. I'm saying they have to have the versatility of Christian McCaffrey to be lined up at the slot position. They need to be lined up as a wide receiver. And that's what has put this guy up there with Offensive Player of the Year votes on NFL.com, is that versatility. And now we're seeing it throughout this offseason more glaring than we ever have throughout the entire NFL, where running backs have been belittled to a point of bargaining away their leverage. Go ahead. I double dog dare you, Jonathan Taylor. Find someone's going to trade for you and pay you. Saquon Barkley, go ahead and hold out. See what kind of deal you can get. Miles Sanders going to the Carolina Panthers, where the Eagles get, 4 running backs for the price of just Miles Sanders? If that doesn't devalue and belittle the position, I don't know what does. So when you have these young running backs coming up now, if they want to be offensive player of the year, if they don't want to just be labeled a running back and they want to be able to do everything else, they're going to have to work on that versatility. And that's something that I think the NFL is also going to embrace as time goes on, because you see it a lot more in college with guys catching passes and not just running the football. And that's being developed more and more with the pass-happy game of football, not just in the NFL, but at the college level as well. So you're going to have to see these guys really start to take that next step in terms of offensive versatility.
Yeah, just listen to some of these names, Farzy, that got cut this offseason. Ezekiel Elliott, 27 years old, cut. Dalvin Cook, 27 years old, cut. Leonard Fournette, 28 years old, cut. Kareem Hunt, 27 years old, not signed. Joe Mixon, 26 years old. They had to take a pay cut to stay. Aaron Jones, 28 years old, had to take a pay cut to stay. Saquon Barkley, only 26 years old, had to settle for the franchise tag. I know he renegotiated, didn't get much more. Josh Jacobs, same deal. Franchise tag, just renegotiated, didn't get much more. And now Jonathan Taylor asking for a trade, doesn't happen. Austin Eckler asked for a trade, doesn't happen. Derrick Henry, there was rumors he was on the market, doesn't happen. The value of the running back position just doesn't exist anymore. You have to be. Christian McCaffrey is a wide receiver. The guy is a wide receiver. He caught 100 balls last year. That's a wide receiver's numbers. So the NFL of the 90s, where you had this cowbell running back who carried the day, just doesn't exist anymore. And I talked about this on another show. Just look at the last few Super Bowl winners. Kansas City Chiefs win the Super Bowl last year. Isaiah Pacheco, 7th-round draft pick, as their running back. New England Patriots, the Los Angeles Rams win the Super Bowl the year before that. Sony Michel, Darrell Henderson, and Cam Akers are their running backs. Year before that is the Tampa Bay Bucks. They had Leonard Fournette on a 1-year, $3.5 million deal. The Kansas City Chiefs in Super Bowl 54, Damian Williams. Super Bowl 53, New England Patriots, Rex Burkhead, James White, and Sony Michel. And then we remember the Philadelphia Eagles in 2017, Jay Ajayi, LeGarrette Blount, and Corey Clement. You don't need that bell cow running back anymore, the guy that's going to carry the day for you. So that's why they're not paying these guys. You just don't have to be successful in the NFL anymore.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. So I want to ask you this. I've been thinking about Jimmy Graham. All right. If you remember, when he was going through his contract dispute with the Saints, he was listed as a tight end, but he wanted to be paid as a wide receiver. And I remember the Saints even pulled up his Twitter profile where he described himself as a tight end. Now, I don't think that was a nail in the coffin, but that's just how far they're willing to dig in order to prove, no, you're a tight end. Like, our our running backs now just going to try to label themselves as slot receivers to try to get more money? Because if you're a running back now in the NFL, that's the only way you're going to get it, is if you're catching ball. And I agree with you. Christian McCaffrey's a wide receiver more than he is, or a slot receiver more so than he is a running back. But obviously he came up that way with the Carolina Panthers. But now the game has evolved to a point where the last thing you want to be on a team is a running back. And then after that, it's probably a linebacker on most defenses now. Like the Eagles don't want to pay linebackers. Right after running back, it's linebacker. So when you look at those two positions right now, they are being dwindled down to guys having to change the way their positions are being described in the NFL and the way those positions are being played. So to go back to the list real quick, Christian McCaffrey is number one. And then after that, that's where you have the run of wide receivers. Jamar Chase, who you mentioned, is number two on this list. Justin Jefferson, I was surprised. I think Justin Jefferson is the best wide receiver in the NFL right now. And if you're going to talk about other guys being ahead of him, Jamar Chase obviously has a pretty damn good quarterback throwing him the football in Joe Burrow. I think most people take Joe Burrow over Kirk Cousins, but just all in all, I think it's Justin Jefferson. He was ranked number 2 on that NFL Top 100 list. It was Mahomes, Justin Jefferson, and then Jalen Hurts as the top 3 players in the NFL. Then it's Tyreek Hill, Justin Fields, Jalen Hurts, Aaron Rodgers, Garrett Wilson are all tied for 5th on NFL Offensive Player of the Year going into the 2023 season. Justin Fields already?
Yeah, he's the sexy pick for everybody right now of having a great season. I think what Jalen Hurts did from year 1 to year 2 is what a lot of people are seeing with Justin Fields, is they're hoping he takes that same leap as a starter from year 1 to year 2 as a starter. And if he can, we saw it. The Eagles played the Chicago Bears last year. You see how talented Justin Fields is as a runner. And if he can start to be able to add throwing to his game, he could be a really, really tough quarterback.
Yeah, it's interesting to see. And again, these are predictions, so I understand it. It makes sense if you're looking at a guy like Justin Fields and you're saying, all right, he can take a Hertzian type leap from year 1 to year 2, then all right, go for it. You know, I'd love to, as a fan of football, I'd absolutely love to see it. I think a lot of it's going to come down to the idea of the Eagles overall just taking that step forward as an offense. The thing that holds the Eagles back, and we'll get into this in a second. We've talked a lot about the good things that surround the Eagles this season. We'll continue with this list of potential players of the year, defensive, offensive. We'll also talk about coach of the year and all that stuff, rookies as well. But there are concerns surrounding this Eagles team. And I know in the opening segment of the show, Bill, you and I were going back and forth on some things that might be a little too optimistic. Some things that when facing the Eagles might be the rose-colored glasses. Well, when we come back, we're going to break down a couple of the storylines surrounding the Eagles that are big question marks surrounding this team going into the year. We'll revisit the topic of whether or not the Super Bowl hangover is going to be a real thing with the Eagles. We'll also run through the NFC and AFC when we talk about potential Super Bowl matchups when it comes to the big storylines surrounding the rest of the NFL. Dan Sileo has the day off. That's Bill Colarulo. I'm Marc Farzetta. This is the National Football Show here on the
Heading down the shore. Have a ball once more.
Here, imaginations run wild and time stands still. Because here, you can find the best of the Jersey Shore, all on one 5-mile island. So leave the old you behind and get lost in the woods.
Wild, wild, wildwood days.
Score and save in southeastern PA and Delaware with Colony Pools this football season, and let the experts close your pool with a custom Merlin safety cover in green for the birds. And if you join our Winter Watch team, we'll give you another 20% off, and Colony Pools will handle it all. Keep your tiles on your pool, not in your pool. Fly with Colony right now, Birds fans. Visit flywithcolony.com. EAGLES, Eagles.
Just gave the sauce a good stir, Bill. Oh, smell it on my clothes. Literally smell. I put a little flank steak in there, for the extra flavor. Oh,
now do you do crabs and gravy ever?
It's actually one of my dad's favorite things. So this is where it gets interesting. You just touched on a really big subject here because my mom is from Baltimore. My dad is from Ambler. I'm from Ambler. And those worlds come to a crashing collision. Okay. Like my dad, when he went to meet my mom's family, they put crabs on the table and my dad didn't eat anything. And they go, well, what are you doing? And he goes, well, I'm just waiting for the gravy and pasta. And they're like, what? What are you talking about? So because they have the Old Bay all over them. But yeah, it's not my favorite thing, but I do it. I just don't do it in Baltimore where it's just not a very big thing. Are you a big fan of it?
Big fan. Yeah. So I'm obviously big Italian family. And what we used to do every summer, and we've gotten away from it, is we would take a big crabbing trip. All of us, there'd be like 30, 40 of us. We would catch hundreds of crabs. It'd be awesome. Then we'd have the assembly line cleaning them in my grandmom's garage. And then my grandmother would make the crab gravy for the following weekend. And I mean, I could sit there with a bowl of the gravy and a loaf of Italian bread and just dip it like it was soup, man. I love that.
That is fantastic. So my wife and I recently moved into a new neighborhood. In January, we moved. And my neighbor, who, we're just getting to know, comes over like the first month we're here. Actually, maybe 2 months later, and he gives me like a dozen crabs, like live crabs, and I'm like, "What the hell?" He's like, "Oh, I like to go crabbing, and I like to share the wealth." And I'm like, "Share away, my friend, share away." Yeah. So before we go away, I'll be delivering some brajol over there as well. So we keep it going. It's a back and forth. How
I like it. I need a neighbor like that, man.
Yeah, really. You ain't kidding, man. Also. I do want to say that I don't know what anybody else is doing in our chat here. By the way, yes, Big Sills is off today. Needed a day running around with the family for the holiday weekend. So you got Bill and I here filling in on the National Football Show. But later tonight, Bill, I'm going to be hitting up Fairmount, my old neighborhood, because the Eagles are having a Kelly Green pep rally just outside the penitentiary. I know Brandon Graham will be there. I'm going to swing by. I'm going to do a little Farzy in the Field segment, interview some fans, do a little package for tomorrow morning's Farzy show, and see if anybody else wants to run it during the day on right here on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel. But I'll be headed down there. I have not been around a bevy of Eagles fan, COVID and all that stuff. It's been rough. But, last year I was at Ocean Casino during the pregame show. And then, of course, I scurry home to make sure that I catch the game in time. This year I'll be doing pre-post. You and I will be doing halftime for JAKIB Media from Ocean's Casino. So I look forward. Yep. I'm pumped to do that. But I'm not around the fans like I used to be. So I'll be down there tonight in Fairmount. So if anyone's there, you see me running around, please say hi, and maybe we'll get you in on the bit to talk about your bold predictions for the upcoming NFL season and your Philadelphia Eagles as well. That's what I look forward to, Bill.
That is awesome. I wish I was making my way down there. I'm a former Fairmount guy too, Farzy. 20th and Green.
I was at 27th and Brown.
Nice. Yeah.
Look at that. Wow. It is great. I spent 20 years. I spent my adult life pretty much in Fairmount. I love that neighborhood. Moved out for a minute, came right back as soon as I could. It was fantastic. Absolutely love that neighborhood. But speaking of predictions for the upcoming season, we've talked a lot about some great things going on with the Philadelphia Eagles this year and some great things to expect. And, it could all blow up in our faces. I don't expect it to, but it could. If it does, like our friend Jimmy Kempski for Philly Voice does these pieces during the offseason, like why your team will be a complete dumpster fire. And then he also does why your team's going to win a Super Bowl. So I think we know why the Eagles could win a Super Bowl. But why would the Eagles be a complete dumpster fire this year, Bill? On the other side, now you and I just want to say it one more time for those that hadn't heard it yet. We think the Eagles are going to win the division. You think the Eagles are going to win the division, correct?
I do.
As do I. But let's just go to a parallel universe here for a second. And why would the Eagles possibly be a dumpster fire? What would make the Eagles, and we're not going to predict injuries because we're not putting that into the world. We're talking about things when it comes to play calling, overall performance. We're not talking about injuries. But when you talk about this Philadelphia Eagles team, if this is going to be a dumpster fire, there's two reasons that jump out to me as to why it's going to be a dumpster fire, Bill.
Well, let me ask you, though, Farzy, when you say dumpster fire, are we talking about a losing record or just not winning the NFC East?
Oh, I'm talking about losing record. I'm talking about this Eagles team is nothing compared to what they were last year. They don't win the division. They maybe get a wild card, but it's a reason this team is going to be a shell of what we're expecting them to be in the upcoming season.
So I can't imagine that they are a quote-unquote dumpster fire absent injuries. I can't imagine that this team, with the talent that they have, are not going to win a lot of games. Now, with that being said, the way that they maybe don't win the NFC East and don't make it far into the playoffs would be on the defensive side of the ball. Is the linebacker position bigger questions than we're talking about? Is the safety position going to be a problem? Is Sean Desai the right guy? Now, I know Jonathan Gannon is a polarizing figure in this town. I wasn't a huge fan of his, but I don't think he was as bad as a lot of people said he was. I didn't like the style of play. It came back to haunt us in the Super Bowl when we saw good quarterbacks, how they could just pick apart his defense. But is Sean Desai worse than Jonathan Gannon? And are these linebackers and these safeties a problem? That's the way I could see potentially the Eagles not winning enough games to win the division, or potentially losing in round one of the playoffs, wild card.
You hit on one of mine, Sean Desai. Absolutely. I think the two biggest question marks going into this season, one is named Sean Desai and the other is named Brian Johnson. I know that he babysat Jalen Hurts, and I know he's known Jalen Hurts forever. He's known Jalen Hurts before Jalen Hurts knew Jalen Hurts and all this other stuff. I don't care. I need to see them calling plays. I need to see them being put in a great position by their offensive coordinator, because this is a guy that hasn't called plays since college. All right? That's a concern for me. Is it an overwhelming concern? No, but if I am looking as for a reason why this team is not going to be nearly as successful as I really am expecting to be, it's because, one, their offensive coordinator isn't anywhere as good as Shane Steichen was. I don't want play calling to have to go back to Nick Sirianni, because Nick wasn't very good at it. And I think Nick Sirianni not being good at play calling is more so the reason that Shane Steichen was the play caller, and more so the reason certainly as to why Brian Johnson is now the play caller. It's not because they're so great. It's that maybe Nick isn't that good at it, and he's much better at being that CEO type of head coach where he has his hands off and he delegates. Game planning the whole week, great. Game planning day of, not so great. The other reason is Sean Desai. I think your coordinators are the biggest question marks going into this. Again, you're talking about, so we look at the safety position right now with this Philadelphia Eagles team, and we look at a guy like Reed Blankenship, and then we could be looking at Sidney Brown. And that's what a lot of us want. That's what I want. But if you did that, that's a guy that has 1 year under his belt of being a starting safety in the NFL and a rookie. So now you have a guy that has 1 year of being a defensive coordinator under his belt in Sean Desai, and you have a guy who has never been an offensive coordinator or play caller in the NFL. He's coming off being a quarterback's coach, hasn't called plays since he was in college. That is a concern of mine. And if the Eagles are going to have a lot of trouble this year, I think it's going to go back to the two coordinators who might be in over their head. Now, I don't think they're going to be, but I won't know that until I see it. Look, Jonathan Gannon, I'm with you. I know a lot of people didn't like him because he didn't blitz. The bottom line is, Bill, if I told you that the Eagles were going to have 70 sacks before a season, and you're a hardcore Eagles fan, you're doing backflips with excitement. But if I tell you, hold on, whoa, they hardly ever blitz, then you're like, well, that's not as fun. Like, how specific and how particular can you be? You're bringing the quarterback down. It's the bottom line. But when it comes to Sean Desai, if he doesn't make in-game adjustments, if he does over pursue, if he does blitz more and gets burned, well, then this defense is going to look as big. It's not going to look as tough. It's not going to look as nasty. And on the offensive side of things, let's say you don't make adjustments as well. Let's say you don't throw to your running backs again. Let's say your wide receivers, you can't get it figured out when it comes to Devontae Smith and it comes to A.J. Brown. Let's say you don't have those guys on the same page with the quarterback. Let's say Dallas Goedert isn't getting enough touches. Let's say that DeAndre Swift isn't catching enough passes out of the backfield. Like, there's a lot to orchestrate here. And as we always say, and we say it with every other team that has an embarrassment of riches, especially on the offense, there's one ball. There's one ball. And although I don't think it's going to be a factor this year, it is in the back of my mind that this ridiculous storyline has started up somehow, some way, with now A.J. Brown and Team Devontae Smith, Team A.J. Brown. I hate it, but A.J. Brown has heard it. And it started with Darius Slay saying that Devontae Smith, it's not going to be long before we're talking about him as if he's the best wide receiver in the NFL. A.J. Brown's, 27? Devontae Smith's, 24, 25 years old? They're not that far off. an age here. They could both be the best wide receiver in the NFL. But I don't need that poison starting to get dropped in the old drink there, the Philadelphia Eagles. So 1 and 2, I go with the coordinators as to why this team could absolutely be poised for disappointment. And then after that, I'll go to the fact that you only have one football to go around this offense, and you got a load of weapons to share that football with. So if I had to say that this team was going to have a disappointing year, comes down to coordinators and sharing the football offensively.
Yeah, the Brian Johnson thing calling plays is I know Nick Sirianni and Brian Johnson have both said, look, we do a lot of game planning during the week. A lot of these plays are already put in place before game day, but we've seen it. You saw it in 2017 with Doug Peterson. You saw it last year with Shane Steichen. There is a feel for the game that a play caller has to be able to call the right play at the right time, make appropriate adjustments depending on what defense you're getting. So that is a huge question mark. You're right. Can Brian Johnson, in the heat of the moment, make the right play calls? 2-minute drills, things of that nature. How is he going to be? So I'm hopeful as well that he's going to be okay. He was here last year, but we won't know, just like we won't know how Nakobe Dean's going to play. We have to see it before we can say for certain. But I'm going to give a stat I've been seeing in the chat. There's a lot of Cowboys hate going on in the chat. And let me get this out of the way first. I am a huge Eagles fan, and I hate the Cowboys probably just as much as the rest of you. But there's another stat that is extremely interesting that the Eagles are going to have to buck this trend if they want to repeat as the first NFC East champs in 20 years. And that's Dak Prescott's record against the NFC East. Dak Prescott, say what you will about him, and he's lost big games, and he was a turnover machine last year. As a starter in the NFL, Dak Prescott is 27-7 against the NFC East. He's 8-3 against the Eagles, 9-2 against the Commanders, and 10-2 against the Giants. So if the Philadelphia Eagles want to buck that trend, we have to be able to beat Dak Prescott and the Dallas Cowboys. And I'm hopeful this is the year the Eagles go 2-0 against Dallas and whip up on them in Dallas. But that's something that shocked me was Dak Prescott's record against the NFC East.
You know what? I enjoy that. And I know I shouldn't enjoy it, but I'm aware. I didn't know the exact numbers, but I'm aware of his success around not just the Eagles, but the entire NFC, okay? I love it because it sets them up with such disappointment. They go through the regular season being able to build up this kind of bravado, build up this confidence. And then what happens? I mean, talk about dumpster fires. They're a dumpster fire when the playoffs come around. So I love that idea, Bill, that they build themselves up throughout the regular season and they have a lot of success throughout the regular season. And then when it matters most, they come up the smallest. And there's no better example than last year. I mean, you're talking about Jalen Hurts getting more playoff wins in one playoff run than Dak Prescott has in his career. So that to me shows you, or as many as Dak Prescott has in his career. So that to me is just more reason to believe that the Cowboys are going to fall apart. The other thing, we talk about play calling from Brian Johnson. If you're Mike McCarthy, you taking on more responsibility is probably not the best thing if you're the Dallas Cowboys. I know he's had success with guys like Aaron Rodgers, and I know everyone says Aaron Rodgers is the guy that made that team. People forget there was like 18 different Green Bay Packers on IR the year they won the Super Bowl against the Steelers. So there's some part of that, of them winning, was coaching. I'll acknowledge that, and I'm not a Mike McCarthy fan in the least, but that's a fact. So the Dallas Cowboys coming up this year and potentially having another great season within the NFC East and beating up on the other teams, to me, that doesn't matter, because ultimately what's going to matter is when they underperform right around playoff time. And I love when they build up their hopes only to have their hopes and dreams burned by the time playoff season runs around.
Yeah, let me make this clear. I don't think the Dallas Cowboys are going to win the NFC East this year. But when I'm talking about that record, the Philadelphia Eagles, when you look at their schedule, can't afford to lose games to the Dallas Cowboys. Remember, NFL changed the rules now.
Good point.
There is only one team that gets that bye. And I think that was very important for the Philadelphia Eagles to make it to the Super Bowl last year, was having that first round bye, having home field advantage at the Link. And I don't think there's a team in the NFC that can come into the Link and beat the Philadelphia Eagles in the playoffs. But if the Eagles have to go on the road, they have to go to San Francisco, or they have to go to another team's stadium, I don't like our chances as much as I do at the Link. So that's why I think you look at this record. Yeah, the Dallas Cowboys, they'll fall apart. They do every year. But if the Eagles lose to the Dallas Cowboys, that could be the difference between a 1 seed and the 2 seed, which is huge now with the 1 seed only getting the bye. So that's what I mean by that.
No, and I absolutely hear that. Yeah, I think people understand that. Yeah, we don't really have high hopes for the Cowboys this year. But like, here's the thing I don't understand. Cowboys fans every year, they get louder and louder by doing less and less. Like, that's the thing. Like, it still ends with disappointment for them. Like, even if they think through the regular season they got some great things going for them, you have a guy like Cooper Rush win you 4 games with Dak Prescott being out last year. Then they come back. Dak's a turnover machine when he comes back. It's just so crazy to me that they seem to get what's the word, puffy more and more every single year by doing less and less. And that to me just doesn't make any damn sense.
What's their last championship appearance? 1995?
Yeah, I would say 95. The year maybe
it was the last conference championship game I think they went to.
Jeez. So. Yeah, that's pretty horrifying. And yet they still get loud. You know what? It's funny. They don't really feel themselves either. If they did, they'd at least come back down to earth and be realists. Cowboys fans should be humble when you think about it because they don't have a lot to brag about. Not within the last 2.5 decades. Funny how that works. Let's go back to that list that we had earlier when it comes to the defensive player of the years and defensive player of the year, offensive player of the year. And this is on the note of guys like guys from the Dallas Cowboys. Now, we've talked about Jalen Carter potentially as a rookie, defensive player of the year, rookie defensive player of the year. We've talked about Nolan Smith in that regard. When it comes to other guys that could potentially be defensive players of the year from the Philadelphia Eagles, not a lot of guys jump out to you other than Hassan Reddick. Hassan Reddick should have gotten a lot more consideration than he got last year. And wouldn't you know it, not even on the list this year, Bill, as voted by NFL.com and the experts there. Micah Parsons is the #1 man voted for Defensive Player of the Year. After that, it's TJ Watt, it's Myles Garrett, it's Nick Bosa. Sauce Gardner is on this list. Roquan Smith and Patrick Surtain, the second, is on this list. Again, slighted Bill. Hassan Reddick, your thoughts?
I don't understand why Reddick doesn't get more respect nationally as a great defensive player. And I've had people say to me, because I've done videos about this on my Instagram, oh, well, he's only done it last year. That's not true. He is the first player in NFL history to have double-digit sacks for 3 different teams, 3 straight seasons. But yet the guy continues to not get the respect nationally. The only thing I could think of is, his first couple years in the league were a disappointment. He was a very high draft pick coming out of Temple, and he did not live up to that draft pick early. But he certainly has the last 3 years, and you saw it last year. It's not all about numbers. We've talked about that before when we were talking about quarterbacks. It's not all about numbers. You look at what Hassan Reddick did to opposing offenses, and he was so disruptive last year. I don't understand it. Look, is he going to win Defensive Player of the Year? I don't know. But should he be in the conversation for it? Absolutely. Then that's what I don't understand, how these guys do not give him the respect nationally. But, hey, look, let's hope he proves everybody wrong again. With that defensive line, he certainly can put up double-digit sacks for the 4th straight season.
Yeah, okay, so on that point, we talk about success with the Cardinals. We talk about success with the Panthers. We talk about success with the Eagles. People look at that because he's done it with 3 different teams as if that's a detriment, like that's against him. The fact that he has had different defensive coordinators, the fact that he's been in different schemes, but been able to maintain that same level of success, if not take it further like he did last year with the Eagles, that's amazing to me. And to not get the type of respect that he at least deserves by being in that conversation, Bill, is ridiculous. Now, you're going to be looking at a guy like Nolan Smith being in that edge rusher position, similar to he is. You're going to be looking at defensive line, as you pointed out, that the Eagles have put together this year with Jalen Carter and Fletcher Cox in the middle of that defensive line. You're going to be able to have guys mixed in there with Brandon Graham and Josh Sweat. And still, is it like the only thing that makes sense to me? I mean, in all honesty, it's still just bottom line doesn't make sense that he's not in the conversation. But if you're really trying to explain it, is it similar to the way we talk about the Eagles offense, like where there's only one ball and everybody is helping everybody and everyone can have success, but you have a guy like Devontae Smith helping out A.J. Brown, same vice versa, and Jalen Hurts is your MVP caliber quarterback? Is it the fact that the Eagles defense is so versatile that people don't look at Hassan Reddick like, oh, it's not him, it's the team, to use Micah Parsons' line from a year ago. Because to me, I think that totally downplays the impact Hassan Reddick has on the rest of that defense and the guys that are actually trying to get into the backfield.
Yeah, I don't know if that's the case because there's other teams. I mean, you look at the San Francisco 49ers, and Nick Bosa is an absolute stud, but they have a lot of great players on their defense as well, and he still gets respected, as he should. Nick Bosa is one of the best defensive players in the league. I just don't understand the Hassan Reddick hate, but I really think if you look at the stats, and I just pulled them up again, I really think the reason Reddick doesn't get the respect is if you look at his first 3 seasons in the league, his rookie year, 2.5 sacks, sophomore year, 4 sacks. His third year in the league, 1 sack. So I think a lot of experts still look at those 3 seasons and think, oh, this guy was a first-round bust. And he bounced back, 12.5 sacks in Arizona the year after, 11 sacks in Carolina, and then puts up 16 sacks last year. So just like we were talking about Jalen Hurts, maybe what he needs to do is do it again. Maybe if Hassan Reddick does it for the 4th straight year, he'll finally get respected.
I swear, I'm not even kidding with you, Bill. I had that same thought. I was like, Jalen Hurts needs to do it again. And a 4th year, like how many times does he have to be like knocking on the door at the Hall of Fame to get any kind of respect whatsoever? Because he's talking about years down the line for a guy like him. Yeah. 3 years in a row for 3 different teams is pretty damn special. That means wherever you go, you're having success. And not just like mild. He's not coming away with 8 sacks here. It's double-digit sacks. It's a guy that should be without a doubt, defensive player. Does he need to force fumbles and score touchdowns to really get people's attention? Because it's been long enough. It's been 3 straight years. To do it a 4th year, I mean, that would be unbelievable. But he's done it enough.
Tone just reminded me as well. Another 3.5 sacks in the playoffs. I mean, the guy did it in the playoffs as well. And I know, look, the haters will say he didn't do it in the Super Bowl and all that. But they had to change the rule in the NFL with regard to a third quarterback because of what Hassan Reddick did to the San Francisco 49ers.
That's right.
So, and Tone's hitting us with stats here. Reddick also led the league in third down sacks in 2022 and forced fumbles. Still doesn't get respected. I don't understand it.
But here's the other part. So obviously those are clutch plays right there. Tone's also saying that because he plays for the Eagles, that's why he doesn't get the respect. But then let's look at it like this. So if he does it for a 4th year, okay, it might only be 3 teams, but that's 4 different defensive coordinators. Yeah. What more do you need? It's beyond frustrating.
And on a side note here too, let's hope Hassan Reddick is healthy. I know he's battling that thumb injury coming into camp this year, or coming out of camp, I should say.
Yeah.
And we talked about A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and potentially being some drama there. I'm hoping the whole contract situation with Hassan Reddick doesn't rear its ugly head until the offseason, because he wants a new deal. Severely underpaid when you look at what the other edge rushers in the league are getting. Sure.
The thing that is interesting about that, I know some Eagles fans took issue with reporters bringing it up. It was Hassan Reddick that actually brought up the idea of being underpaid and brought up his contract first. And then was it Jeff McClain or Dave Zingaro, I think, that followed up on the question or on the statement saying, well, hold on, you brought up your contract. That's worth exploring there. So, yeah, hopefully he does get a new deal. Hopefully he's around here for at least a couple more years and continues to be an impact player, which I think he can be. But, yeah, I think if he starts being that bigger money guy, then maybe the rest of the league will take a little bit more notice as far as getting more attention for Defensive Player of the Year rankings. But, yeah, that's something that I think he'd like to see, a deal done and better recognition from around the league as well. I remember talking to guys that struggled to even make Pro Bowls. And you could say some of this is sour grapes, but I remember talking to a handful of Eagles that were Pro Bowl caliber, but not Pro Bowl players. And one of the things that they talked about how is if they weren't big money guys, they didn't really get a lot of that recognition. If they were early first round picks and young, then they would get recognition. But if they were in the league 3, 4, maybe 5 years and they weren't getting the big money, then forget about Defensive Player of the Year consideration. They're lucky to get even Pro Bowl consideration at that point. Now, again, some of that could be sour grapes with some guys not getting enough playing time or enough money. But when you look at a guy like Hassan Reddick, I think he's been around long enough. And he's had the success for long enough. I guess what else could it be when it comes to the money portion of it, because teams do want to promote their players. They want to promote them to Pro Bowl standing. They want to give them more reps and all that stuff, and they want to pay them. So for me, it kind of makes sense when you talk about some of these guys that aren't getting that top dollar just yet and not getting that national recognition that they should be getting.
Yeah, sometimes it's a popularity contest too. We know that.
Sure.
The names that everybody knows and all that good stuff. But we will see. I mean, we were talking about Philadelphia Eagles not getting recognition. For the Defensive Rookie of the Year, though, they are. We have 2 defensive linemen on the list of the NFL's predictions for potentially the Defensive Rookie of the Year, and they come in number 1. Jalen Carter getting 12 votes for Defensive Rookie of the Year, and tied for number 6, Nolan Smith. So they may not like the Eagles, but they like the Georgia Bulldogs.
Yeah, they like the Broad Street Bulldogs. I'll start on Nolan Smith. I said when the Eagles drafted him and I looked around this defense, I don't think we're going to have to wait very long for Nolan Smith to get his first 10-sack season. I think at the NFL level, look, it's only preseason, but you saw the speed. It translated to the NFL game. It's a matter of how Sean Desai is going to deploy him as a edge rusher on this team, as an outside linebacker on this team, trying to get in the backfield. I think the speed is there. The wingspan is certainly there for him. I think the mentality is perfect for him. People talk about him as mini Hassan. He's certainly that. He's got a very similar build to him. I know the easy comparisons are Brandon Graham's personality with Hassan Reddick's type of skill set. I just think the Eagles have a real winner in Nolan Smith. And like we were talking about earlier, when it comes to the sexy numbers and the splash plays and the sacks, that's a guy like Nolan Smith that I think fits that bill very well. When you look at Jalen Carter, the number 1 guy, as you mentioned out there, people are looking at that power. People are looking at the fact that he fell to the Eagles in the draft, and if he didn't have the off-the-field issues, he might have even been the number 1 pick in the draft. Most likely, that to me speaks volumes for what this guy can do. And then above any analyst, above anybody, as you talked about earlier, Bill, from NFL.com ranking these players, I listen to the veterans on this team, when it's Fletcher Cox, whether it's Jason Kelsey, whether it's Dallas Goedert, whoever it might be, Lane Johnson, they're talking about Jalen Carter like he is a unicorn. Like this guy is a force to be reckoned with when you talk about speed, you talk about quickness, you talk about power and strength. He has it all on the interior of this defensive line. Him and Fletcher Cox, I think, are going to be bulldozing offensive lines this season. Where, yes, we're going to be talking a lot about the edge rushers, but man, when we watch games, I think we're going to see a tremendous push up the middle from what the interior defensive line can do, and what kind of break that's also going to give the guys on the edge as well.
Yeah, and you and I talked a little bit about this on the post-game show after the final preseason game. Could Jalen Carter set the Philadelphia Eagle rookie record for most sacks in a season? You have to go back to 2000, where Corey Simon had 9.5 sacks from that defensive tackle position. He's going to have an extra game to do it. I could see Jalen Carter getting double-digit sacks from that defensive tackle position if he's everything that these veterans are saying that he is.
Well, see that. So that goes back to a guy like Javon Hargrave, who got double-digit sacks, right? So now if you are upgrading that position with a guy like Jalen Carter, and he's got the quickness and he's got the strength, then why not? Especially if you still have the same guys on the edge, especially if you still have a guy like Hassan Reddick, especially if you've upgraded the other side with Josh Sweat, I think, proving himself really last year as to what his talent really is at this NFL level. And then also a guy like Nolan Smith coming off that edge as well. I mean, the sky's – that's why when people say they can't get 70 sacks again, look, yes, I understand it would be hard. I understand they got a tougher schedule this upcoming season. But for this defense, I think they have loaded up. Again, for another year. Let's see. Last year, you had Jordan Davis to this defensive line. He has the injury problem. We've talked about that. Then you go and you add Ndamukong Suh. You add Linval Joseph. You already have Javon Hargrave. And now you're adding another edge rusher in Nolan Smith. You've brought in a more dominant defensive tackle or nose tackle in Jalen Carter. And you're pairing that with Hassan Reddick?
Could be scary.
I mean, it could be very scary. Oh, and your secondary, other than your safety positions, are the same. I mean, your first 3 corners, including Vontae Maddox in the nickel corner spot, you're insanely talented defensively. You got a question mark with Nakobe Dean, and I feel like I've been president of the Nakobe Dean optimistic fan club, and then you don't know what you're having yet at the safety position. By the way, we haven't even touched on that. Before we go further on the list, Who are the starting safeties of the Philadelphia Eagles in the upcoming season?
It's a good question. I mean, you know that the one safety position is going to be Reed Blankenship.
Done. Who starts next to him?
Who starts next to him? I don't think it's going to be Sidney Brown yet. I think Sidney Brown may win that job eventually. But there's a guy that really kind of went under the radar when they signed him in the offseason, and it was Justin Evans. So Justin Evans was a second-round pick in 2017 out of Texas A&M. And if you haven't seen the college highlight of him absolutely trucking Derrick Henry in college, it is unbelievable. Go YouTube, but I also have it on my Instagram. But Justin Evans trucked Derrick Henry in college. But he was a promising rookie, drafted in the second round, goes to Tampa Bay, had a really good rookie season, and then the injury bug got him. He was out in 2019 and 2020 with injuries, was completely out of football in 2021, signs a one-year deal last year with the New Orleans Saints, played in 15 games, started 4 of them, and played okay. But the Eagles signed him, and they signed him pretty early on in the offseason, and he's a guy where didn't look like he was getting a lot of reps in the beginning of training camp and started working his way in, working his way up that depth chart. If he can get back to the guy he was coming out of college, he may be your starter at that other safety position. And if it's not him, then clearly I think it'll be Terrell Edmonds, who started for a lot of games for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But keep your eye on Justin Evans. This guy's got a lot of skills. If he can bounce back and he's healthy, he could be a really good safety.
All right, so I'll ask this in 2 ways. I'll ask the prediction, and then I'll ask what you want to happen. So your prediction, because I think it's going to be Terrell Edmonds. My desire is that it's Sidney Brown. What is your prediction? I mean, I know, right? Of all people, right? I mean, I think the startup costs are a real thing. I just want to see him out there. Let him make mistakes. Like, here's the thing I hate about the idea of not starting Sidney Brown. God forbid you coach somebody up. Oh, my God. God forbid you let somebody go out there, make a couple of mistakes, and you can actually coach him up and he can learn. And then maybe by week 3, week 4, he's got his feet wet enough to the point where he can really help out this defense. The other thing is, if you're a safety, you don't got to be necessarily the deepest man on the field. You don't have to be overly aggressive. You can try to tame that a little bit with Sidney Brown because you have guys up front that can get to the quarterback, and you have guys up front that can make a mistake. So I feel like your safeties and even your corners to a degree are going to have a little bit of a not a learning curve, but have a little bit of leeway here considering the pass rush you're going to be able to generate even without blitzing. Again, without blitzing, like last year, like under Jonathan Gannon. You might see a little bit more blitzing, but even more similar to that. But my desire is Sidney Brown. My prediction is going to be Terrell Edmonds.
Yeah, I could see the argument, like you're saying, getting Sidney Brown in early because you look at this schedule, they don't really play a good quarterback. Well, Kirk Cousins is a decent quarterback, but they don't really play an upper echelon quarterback until week 5. So you could put Sidney Brown in there. He's got Mac Jones week 1, Kirk Cousins week 2, Baker Mayfield week 3, Sam Howell week 4. So you could talk about those startup costs, getting him some play. And I think they will. So when we're talking about the quote unquote starter, I think it'll be Terrell Edmonds or Justin Evans. But I do think Sidney Brown is going to get some playing time in these games, trying to get him up to speed. He's certainly going to play special teams. We know that. But is he also going to get on the field on the defensive side of the ball? And I think he will. I do think before the season is over, Sidney Brown and Reed Blankenship will be your starting safeties.
Okay. All right. Look, we got our final segment coming up. We went long on that first one. We were just getting into the football and the Eagles and all that stuff. Defensive Rookie of the Year, we touched on that. We'll get into Comeback Player of the Year. We'll get into Coach of the Year, where Nick Sirianni ranks and all of that. Spoiler, I think some people are going to be disappointed. We'll get into that conversation. We'll make some predictions about the AFC as well. We'll get to some of your comments in the chat coming up in a minute. That's Bill Colarulo. I'm Marc Farzetta. We're in for Dan Sileo, who has the day off. We'll be back in a minute here on the JAKIB Media YouTube channel.
Go passionately. Go fearlessly. Go confidently.
Go Birds!
Go confidently towards your goals with First Trust, Philly's hometown bank for nearly 90 years and the official bank of the Philadelphia Eagles. We're focused on getting you over the goal line. So go with conviction, go with trust,
Go Birds!
and go forward with us by your side. First Trust Bank, the official bank of Philadelphia dreams. Oh, and go Birds.
The greatest fans on earth. It's a bold statement, but would you expect anything less from Philadelphia? 58 years of heartache creates a toughness, a grit, a resolve not found in most. Sure, our prayers were answered, but now that we've had a taste, we're looking for more. Pondley Hockey, official partner of the Philadelphia Eagles.
All right, did you know I was the mommy slam dunk champion?
Really?
Yes, really don't sound so surprised.
Let's see it.
Oh, you're ready. All right, here we go. Let's hear the crowd. So go to right, go to left, fake 'em out. Mama, go up, up, up.
She did it.
Again? You can't avoid gravity, but United Healthcare can help you avoid financial surprises by helping you compare costs and doctor quality ratings. United Healthcare.
EAGLES. Eagles.
Looking forward to being around the fans in about an hour. I'll be down Fairmount. I'll be in the old stomping grounds, man. Right outside the penitentiary for the Kelly Green kickoff. By the way, did you hear Dave Spadaro? I didn't realize until Dave Spadaro said this during the pregame or during the preseason. The fastest selling and most selling alternate jersey ever in the NFL. Ever. Not just like Philadelphia Eagles jersey, but ever in the NFL, the Kelly Green. And they even thought, no, maybe we won't bring it back. How bonkers is that it has literally flown off the shelves in the time that it's been on, Bill? It's insane.
Doesn't surprise me, though, man. We've been waiting for this. We have been waiting for this. But the reason they didn't bring these out sooner was because of the whole having that second helmet rule that the NFL used to have. Because Jeffrey Lurie didn't want to have this alternate jersey, but wear the midnight green helmets with it. So now that they've changed that, it's going to be awesome.
See, Bill, I always thought that was bull. I always thought it was bull.
There's truth there. There's truth.
I understand that there's the rule, and they said it was the rule that prevented them. But if you notice, the green helmet they had did not match the same green they had on their black jerseys. Like, remember, the black jersey had the green trim. It wasn't the same. Yeah. So I'm like, I thought they were. Plus, I have seen Howie Roseman. I've seen Don Smolinski talk about it. And like talking about bringing back the Kelly Green jersey prematurely. I don't know if it was like a death sentence in the Eagles organization, but it was like just something you didn't do. I've had Eagles play. Jason Avant would tell me how much the Lauries hated Kelly Green. And other players would tell me how much the Lauries hated Kelly Green. They bring it back. It turns out to be a phenomenal business decision. Flies off the shelves.
They love it now with all the green they're making from it. You know what I mean? So they're making a ton of money off of it right now. But let me ask you. So Kelly Green jerseys, fire. I mean, those things are awesome.
Definitely.
What other throwback jersey in the NFL would you put up there as one of the best?
As the best throwback jerseys. Oof. I know everybody likes the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I think the Tampa Bay, the creamsicle sherbet, whatever the hell that is, I think that's ugly. Yeah. People love it. I was never a fan of it. The throwback jerseys, the San Diego Chargers, what powder blue, baby blue. Ones. That was a great one.
Yeah, those white helmets with them look good.
Oh, those are pretty fantastic.
So someone in the chat just said the Oilers. And how about the Tennessee Titans are going to wear throwback Oilers jerseys this year? That's a little bit rubbing it in, isn't it? You take the team from Houston and you're going to wear a throwback jersey.
Yeah. The Oilers jerseys were great. Man.
I stumped you with this one.
Yeah, you did.
So I think in Philly, we're lucky. We got not only the throwback Kelly Greens. I love the Phillies throwback powder blues, man. Those are fire too.
Yeah, I think those are awesome. I mean, I was young, I don't remember, but like people told me that they weren't very well received originally, which I think is ridiculous. But no, for me, definitely the Kelly Green Eagle. Obviously, I like the San Diego Chargers, the powder blue. I guess I just really like blue. And the New England Patriots logo. The old one with the
white helmet with that old Patriot on it.
Yeah, exactly. That was pretty cool. Like when they lost to the Bears in the Super Bowl, the 85 Bears, that was a great look. Like I like that old school look. Like the Packers really haven't changed. I think about that. The Bears obviously haven't really changed. Yeah, that's the old jerseys, man. I got to go Eagles and then San Diego.
Yeah.
Now I'm saying San Diego specifically because that's the Superchargers, man. Yeah. Do you have one that jumps out to you?
No, not really. Not really. I mean, I think I do like those creamsicle Tampa Bay Buck ones. But, it's interesting. I know a lot of Eagles fans are saying, hey, we should go Kelly Green. We should go Kelly Green, all of it. But I kind of like the fact that, look, if you had pizza every single day, you don't love pizza as much, right? So I like the fact that we have to wait for it. It makes it more exciting. If we were Kelly Green, It wouldn't be as exciting.
I'm with you. I'm absolutely with you. Here's the one thing I will say about the somewhat surprising nature of how fast the Kelly Green is flying off the shelves. They won a Super Bowl in the midnight green. They look 48-49. They won back-to-back NFL championships. I don't think you or I were around. 1960, I don't think you and I were around. They won another championship. Other than that, they didn't do anything in the Kelly Green. And then they made it to a Super Bowl with Donovan in the midnight green. They won a Super Bowl in the midnight green. And now more recently, they went to another Super Bowl in the midnight green. And still, we crave it. When in the Michael Vick game where Kevin Cobb got knocked out in the season opener against the Green Bay Packers, and Michael Vick came in, they were wearing the Kelly Green that year in that game, and that was the only other time we saw it. Yeah. And people still loved it then, though. People still loved it then.
Did you like those yellow jacket throwbacks that they had that one year? I actually have one of those. So I used to work for the Eagles, and as a gift to me that season, I got a jersey with the number 75 with my name on the back of it, and I have it in my house. But it was so damn hideous, man.
That was such a tease because I remember the Eagles had announced that they were going to be wearing throwback jerseys, so everybody immediately.
Oh, Kelly Green, yeah.
Thought Kelly Green.
Came out those yellow and blue.
Well, yeah, exactly. And what was it? Was it 2006, 2007?
Yeah, it had to be because that's when I was working down there. Kevin Curtis was the wide receiver. He had a big game that game.
Against the Lions. And Kevin Cobb came in and fumbled almost immediately because they were up by so much. Kevin Curtis had like 200 yards. Yeah. So I remember that game, and they announced that they were going to be doing a throwback jersey. Everyone thought Kelly Green. They came out with the yellow jackets, and everyone just hated it. Hey, I remember they had a lot of Brian Dawkins, Frankfurt Yellow Jackets jerseys, a lot of Brian Westbrook, a couple McNabbs, and then after that game, a couple Kevin Curtises. So there you go. But yeah, that is absolutely wow. That really. So you're a creamsicle guy. You enjoyed the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
I did because they're so ugly. You like them. They're like so ugly that you like them.
All right, let's get back to this list. I want to talk about some more of these predictions. We talked a lot about the Eagles already. We talked a lot about what's going on with Jalen Hurts. We talked a lot about the storylines going into the season, the pros and cons. If the Eagles are going to have a lot of success, why? If the Eagles are going to have some failure this year, why they would have failure. But looking around the rest of this, I think we're looking at a lot of teams in the NFC. We look at the San Francisco 49ers. We look at the Dallas Cowboys as the two biggest threats, most likely, to the Philadelphia Eagles in the NFC. After those two names, Bill, just to stick in the NFC before we go to the AFC, you got the Cowboys and you got the San Francisco 49ers. After that, who in the NFC jumps out to you as a team that could really be a threat to the Eagles to repeat as NFC champions?
Really, I don't see any teams. I know there's a couple that could potentially be better this year. You look at the Detroit Lions. They're the sexy pick that a lot of people think are going to be good. Seattle Seahawks played well with Geno Smith last year. I'm not buying it. I think Geno Smith is an average quarterback. I don't think he's a very good quarterback, but I really don't see other teams on paper, and everything changes when these games get played, obviously, but on paper, if you look at it, I think it's a three-team race. I think you got the Eagles, the 49ers, and the Dallas Cowboys. Dallas Cowboys, I think, are at the bottom of that list. So I really think it's the 49ers and the Cowboys. I don't see another team. Now, one of my buddies, my college quarterback, huge Giants fan, calls me every single day to tell me how good the Giants are going to be this season. So high on Daniel Jones. I don't share the same love of Daniel Jones. What I will say, though, about the New York Giants is I think they have a great coach in Brian Daboll. And that's the one thing that does concern me is you saw them win really with smoke and mirrors last year. I know they had an easier schedule, but Brian Daboll had them win a lot of games simply by really good coaching. So could the Giants cause some problems? I'm not buying Daniel Jones, but I am buying Brian Daboll.
Yeah, and they are a very well-coached team. Even Mike Kafka, their offensive coordinator, who was a backup here in Philadelphia for a little bit. A lot of people look at him as, a head coach in the making. He's a guy that a lot of people have been high on for a long time. Obviously, Wink Martindale knows what he's doing on the defensive side of things. He just doesn't know how to stop Boston Scott. That's kind of been a problem for him. And Darren Waller is, I think, going to be a great tight end with them. I don't have a lot of confidence. If he stays healthy, sure. But Daniel Jones, one of those guys. You know how I was saying I don't really have a lot of respect for all the love that a guy like Justin Herbert gets. I at least understand that more than any respect that Daniel Jones gets. I do not have a lot of respect for Daniel Jones, and I feel like the best way you could sum up Daniel Jones's career is that he could break off a 70-yard run and trip over the 10-yard line and just won't make it into the end zone like he did against the Eagles that night. So for me, I just do not have a lot of respect for Daniel Jones, and any team that is quarterbacked by him, I feel like is going to cough it up when it matters most. So I don't buy into the Giants. But as far as the coaching goes, I don't think they're going to lose games because of coaching. I think they're going to lose games because of turnovers and just overall not being talented enough. And I think they have some very talented. Saquon Barkley just blows me away. And if he can't make money in this league, well, then that position is dead and buried already, as we already know it is, unfortunately. But yeah, for me, if I'm looking at those teams, not name the 49ers and not name the Cowboys, there's one team, and it's not because of quarterbacks on Netflix, but I think Kirk Cousins is a good quarterback with a phenomenal receiver in what he has in Minnesota. And I just think that that's too good a combination, mostly because of Justin Jefferson, to just push to the wayside. The Eagles did a phenomenal job shutting them down in week 2 of the season last year. They'll have an opportunity to do it again this year. But I just think that offense is poised for bigger things, even more so than what they were able to do last year. So just not a team that I think is going to be a threat, not nearly to the likes of the Cowboys or the 49ers, but just another team to kind of put on the watch list. Like I'll put on a similar list to that I will of the Seattle Seahawks and all the things they've been able to do in the offseason. Just another team to keep an eye on. It's going to be the Minnesota Vikings. But I think it is going to be, to me, a one-horse race. I think it's the Eagles. But after that, I think it's by far the 49ers. Like I'll put it to you like this. The Philadelphia Eagles step down. The 49ers, the Cowboys, another step down. Then I think you're looking at the Seahawks and the Minnesota Vikings. Those are the other the tier teams that I'll put it to like that. Would you agree with that kind of tier system in the NFC?
I think I may put the Detroit Lions ahead of the Minnesota Vikings. I think the Detroit Lions, we talk about quarterbacks. As nice of a guy as Kirk Cousins looked on quarterback, and he does look like he's a nice guy, I think Jared Goff is a better quarterback than Kirk Cousins. I think Jared Goff does not get the respect that he should be getting. I don't think he's an elite quarterback by any means, but I do think he is a very good quarterback in this league. And that team looks good. Dan Campbell looks like a good coach. He had them playing really hard last year. They've continued to get better. I think they're going to be the team that comes out of the NFC North. So that's why I wouldn't put the Vikings as high as you would.
Okay. I can see why you do with the Vikings or the Lions. They finished the season really strong last year, so that's the good one there. Jordan Love, a question mark, obviously, with Green Bay when you're looking at that division. The Bears might jump out and surprise some people as well. But again, this is like talking about problems with the Eagles. When you're getting to the third string and the fourth string, you got yourself a pretty good football team. As far as the AFC, you have the teams that kind of jump out to everybody. Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. Then after that, you talk about teams like the Buffalo Bills. You talk about teams like the Cincinnati Bengals and what they could bring to the table. We mentioned earlier Joe Burrow and some of the question marks surrounding his health to start the season. Is it as clear-cut with the Chiefs as it is for the Eagles in the NFC, or do you think the Chiefs have guys that are nipping at their heels?
Again, on paper, I think the Chiefs are always going to be head and shoulders above everybody in the AFC simply because of their quarterback. The quarterback is just so damn good. And Mahomes is just, he's on a different level than these other guys. But I do think that the Bengals are close. Joe Burrow has shown he's a winner. He played really well in his first 2 years in the NFL. And is this the year that the Buffalo Bills can finally get over the hump? I mean, I think they have to do something this year. Josh Allen, every single year, keeps falling short. This has to be the year that the Buffalo Bills do something. But there's another team that I will never count out, and that's the Pittsburgh Steelers. Because you look at Mike Tomlin, the guy's never had a losing record as a head coach. That is a remarkable stat, that this guy has never had a losing record. And it was just a preseason. As Eagles fans, we know what the preseason can look like, Sam Bradford and Chip Kelly. But Kenny Pickett looked really good in the preseason. That receiver they have, Pickens, looks really good. So the Steelers, they could be a dark horse in the AFC.
One thing I couldn't get over from last year is that Najee Harris 2 years ago had this like breakout year, looked like he was going to be a bell cow back and be able to catch the ball out of the backfield as well and do all these great things. And then last year it felt like they really, even with a young quarterback, they did not trust giving the ball to Najee Harris nearly as much as they did in the previous season. And I thought, he was going to be a comfort zone. I thought he was going to be a guy that you could rely on and take some pressure off your young quarterback. And they just did not ride him like I thought they would at the start of the season. Why all of a sudden did he disappear last year?
Well, I had him on my fantasy league 2 years ago.
Oh, did you?
So I was not happy with what he did last year, but I think he was battling some injuries last season. He did have a lot of touches as a rookie, but I think he had maybe a foot. I could be wrong, but I thought he had a little bit of a foot injury last year. But, we'll see. But the guy, they have a lot of power on that offense. I know people are saying no way the Steelers, but good coaching, tough place to play. If their quarterback, I know he's got small hands. That was the thing about him coming out of college, small hands. But the Steelers could be a good team as well. But I do think it's probably a 3-team race. It's probably the Chiefs, the Bengals, and the Bills for that conference.
Man, you love the guys with the small hands there, my friend. Jared Goff, small hands. Kenny Pickett, small hands. It's just the small hands guys. When you look at a Super Bowl matchup, all right, so we'll get into this. We'll jump to this conclusion right now. When it comes to a Super Bowl matchup in the upcoming season, Bill Colarulo, who are you looking at?
See, I'd love to be able to just say something crazy for the clickbait and all that. It's not going to be crazy. We're getting a rematch. It's going to be Kansas City and Philadelphia.
I'm right there with you. I mean,
yeah, it's the obvious choice, but you look at these teams and it would be, first of all, the storyline would be great to have another matchup between these two quarterbacks. Andy Reid again going against Philadelphia. But, there is one team. We're talking about former Philadelphia Eagles coaches with Andy Reid. The one team I didn't mention to keep an eye on is the Jacksonville Jaguars. And when we get to our Coach of the Year predictions, I could see Dougie P winning Coach of the Year this year down there in Jacksonville. He's got a very good quarterback. Trevor Lawrence's rookie season was wasted with the coach. So you saw what he did last year. They got Calvin Ridley coming back from his suspension. So watch out for the Jacksonville Jaguars and Dougie P.
I'm with you as far as watching out for him, but as far as winning the AFC, I'm with you. I definitely think it's going to be an Eagles-Chiefs matchup again. It's going to be a rematch, and this time I got the Eagles coming out on top. But you mentioned the head coach. All right, Coach of the Year. This is astonishing. This is, Bill, astonishing to me. Go back to NFL.com. Coach of the Year, the favorite for Coach of the Year, a man who just got Aaron Rodgers to quarterback his team, Robert Saleh, is the leading candidate on NFL.com to be Coach of the Year. After that, it's your boy, Mike Tomlin. It's your other boy. It's Dan Campbell, Matt LaFleur, and then it's Doug Peterson, Mike McDaniel, Arthur Smith, Brandon Staley, Matt Eberflus, Sean Payton, Ron Rivera, D'Amico Ryans, Kyle Shanahan, Zach Taylor. No mention of Nick Sirianni. None whatsoever.
I don't think that Nick Sirianni can win Coach of the Year, just like Andy Reid probably can't win Coach of the Year. Not putting them on the same level. What I'm saying is when you look at their teams, the fact that they went to a Super Bowl last year, you expect those teams to be good this season. So the teams who usually whose head coaches win Coach of the Year are a team that outperformed the season before, or they lost a lot of players and they played better than anyone expected them to play. So that's why I think you don't see Andy Reid in this list. You don't see Nick Sirianni on this list. Now, Rob Saleh, if he wins Coach of the Year, it would be outrageous. It would be outrageous. You bring in all these players, Aaron Rodgers, and they bring in all these players in the offseason. I don't think Saleh should win Coach of the Year. I do like some of these other guys on the list. I talked about Mike Tomlin. I talked about Dan Campbell. But I do think it is going to be Doug Peterson. And how about Doug Peterson? This shows how ruthless the NFL is. Cut his own son. Cut his own son when final cuts had to happen.
How did that conversation? I would like to have been a fly on the wall. I'd like to see how that conversation went. And I don't know if this is a usual thing, but I'm used to the dramatic coach wants to see you bring your playbook. Like the Eagles told Eli Ricks he made the team with a phone call. You know what I mean? Like, where's the conversations man-to-man, face-to-face about being cut? I hope you're not texting anyone telling them, yeah, don't bother coming in today. Don't just drop the playbook off whenever you got an opportunity. Like, that's just insane to me. But I did see that story about Doug Peterson cutting his own son. And then I saw all the pictures of like Doug Peterson standing next to his son in college and smiling faces and all that. And I'm like, damn, I know it's a business, but that's your little boy, man. That's some rough stuff right there.
They did bring him back to the practice squad, but it just goes to show, yeah, it's NFL, man. It's not show friend, it's show business.
Exactly. Speaking of practice squad, real quick, I want to check in on the chat in a second, but the Eagles did release their practice schedule or practice squad, of course. 4 wide receivers on that list, a little surprising there. No quarterback because obviously they can carry 3. And then the other thing that you look at there was one name in particular that I thought was surprising, but I was happy to see. Anyone jump out to you about that practice squad roster being released?
Now, the only 2 that I knew that they were going to bring back was Britton Covey and Aaron Sippis. And in fact, I did a tweet as soon as they released them, and people were killing me under it saying, they're not bringing Aaron Sippis back to the practice squad. You knew they were going to because they don't have a punter on their damn roster. And remember, the way the CBA works, you are allowed to bring up 2 players a week on game day for a total of 3 times for each player. They did it last year with Britton Covey. Britton Covey got waived last season. They signed him on August 30th last year to the practice squad, and they brought him up week 1, week 2, and week 3 before having to make a decision about actually bringing him on as a full-time punt returner. I think you're going to see the same thing this year with Britton Covey and probably Aaron Sippis if they can't find anybody better. But the one guy that I was really happy to see get on the practice squad was Ben Van Sumeren, because he's got a lot of talent. You saw it in these preseason games. He's just raw, but his athletic ability, I won't be surprised if you see Van Sumeren called up sooner rather than later to help out with that special teams unit. I think he would be a great special teams player.
Look, I had my doubts about him at the start of the preseason and the start of training camp because I kept hearing that word raw surrounding Ben Van Sumeren. And I'm like, okay, that's great. You're talking about a guy that was a fullback running back when he was in Michigan, made the transfer to Michigan State, became a full-time linebacker, and he had that raw talent, had a great pro day, and everyone was hyping him up to be this, great thing. I got to say, I saw it. I saw the potential. He was out there a lot in the preseason. They were sending him on blitzes in the preseason. He was batting footballs down, breaking up passes, making good hits, covering well is also when he had to drop back in coverage. So I saw the raw talent that a lot of other people were talking about. So that was a good thing. But my guy, if I had to root for a guy to make the practice squad, it's the tight end Brady Russell. And I know they just acquired a tight end, making a trade with Denver to bring in Big O, right? To bring in
say his name yet?
Hold on. I think I wrote it phonetically the other day. I want to make sure it's like Obamanam, Obamanam, whatever it is. But yeah, Big O is what I got. Can you say it?
I wrote it out phonetically as well. I think it's Oku Ibunam. Oku Ibunam is, I think, his name.
It's either Oku or Okwe, one or the other. But either way, Brady Russell, I don't think we're going to see a lot of, but he can also play special teams, which is why big reason as to why he's on the practice squad. Had a touchdown in the preseason, had a big catch in the preseason, got it from Tanner McKee, made a couple of good blocks upfield in the preseason. One, I think, was on the Trey Sermon run. The other, the big run. The other was, forget the other one, but he just overall was a guy that is a tight end on this team jumped out to me during the preseason. And I was hoping that the preseason would earn him a spot on the practice squad, and I think it absolutely has, mostly for what he has done on special teams. Actually, you know what it was? It was the return. It was the kick return. He was out blocking in front, making some big blocks downfield or upfield. So that, to me, might have solidified his spot on the practice squad. But I was happy to see that name out there. Julian Good-Jones is another one I know some people were pulling for. Kyron Johnson's another one. And Mekhi Gardner is a cornerback some people were pulling for as well. Folks, it has been a blast. Let me get one more. Let me get a couple in here real quick. Bieniemy, people look forward to him. Kenny Pickett is better than Brock Purdy. Okay, there you go. Micah Tomasetti, Kenny Pickett. Yep, there you go. Dank Kelly Green Burrito had some positive things. Fans don't matter. The players were whining. I don't know what's about. Was I hyping up? I don't think I was hyping up Kenny Pickett.
No, I think I did. I hyped him up. Send the hate my way.
Oh, there you go. Ben Waiting, you seem to be a fan of the show. Thanks, buddy. He wants us to go play Uno because apparently we're 100 years old. I'm going to be going to the Eagles press conference. Are you getting ready for a fun-filled weekend, I hope?
Yeah, hopefully. I got my kids were in Greece for 2 weeks, so they came home last night, so I missed them. I was really excited. I saw them this morning. And now I'm going to see them again and spend the whole weekend, man. They have a great time when they're in Greece, but I miss the hell out of them.
I'm sure, man. I'm sure. Bill, as always, man, fun to fill in with you. Fun to do a show with you as per usual. To everyone in the chat, thank you for being part of the show. Tone, my man, Tone DeShields doing a phenomenal job producing the show. I think is Dan. Do we know if Dan's back tomorrow? Dan Sileo, have we gotten word on that yet? He is back tomorrow. So there you go. Thanks for being a part of the show, everyone in the chat there. Bill, a pleasure as always, my friend.
Yeah, looking forward to it. And you mentioned it earlier, guys, but me and Farz are going to be co-hosting the halftime show when the season starts. So really looking forward to that, man.
Yeah, more Eagles coverage, of course, when the season gets underway. Dan Sileo will be back with you guys hosting the National Football Show tomorrow. Until then, have a great rest of your day, everybody. Tone, great job as always. My name is Marc Farzetta. That's Bill Colarulo. Have a great rest of your day, everybody. See ya.